Well, my first guest is another victim of the corrupt Democratic Party establishment. He served 8 years in prison for corruption charges before President Donald Trump commuted his 14-year sentence. I want you to please welcome former Illinois Governor, Democrat Rod Blagojevich. Rod, you and I had the pleasure of serving together as governors during several years back in the late 90s, early 2000. What a lot of people may not understand is generally governors have a good relationship with each other, whether they're Democrat or Republican. And you and I had a good relationship. And when you were charged by people in the Obama administration, you're from Chicago, where he's from. I think all of us, whether we were Republican or not, were shocked at the charges that were brought against you, because we all scratched our head and said, if what he did was illegal, y'all better get ready for 49 other cells, because we're all going, because everyone was doing. I want you to, for our audience, explain, what exactly did they come after you about?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Mike. And by the way, as you know, as former governors, you've certainly made a lot of good from your time as governor. I didn't go quite as good as yours. It's very impressive, and so nice to see that you have this wonderful live audience. It all started when, on election night in November 2008 in Chicago. It's a magical night, first time America elected a black man president. And President-elect Obama was about to take the stage. Dignitaries, governors, mayors, senators, all kinds of bigwigs from Washington were there backstage. A labor leader who was close to President-elect Obama and I came up to me and said, Barack called me last night. He wants Valerie Jarrett to be the senator, wanted me to talk to you about what you want. And we discussed all those possibilities, political horse trading. They criminalized it with me. Obama went to the White House for 8 years. I went to the big house for 8 years, 2,896 days, not that I was counting. And I think it's fair to say he had a better 8 years than me. And, you know, I joke about it, but the fact is what they did to me at the AAA level to a Democratic governor is what these weaponized, corrupt prosecutors have been doing to President Trump at the major league level. Democrats shouldn't do it to Republicans. Republicans shouldn't do it to Democrats. This is the United States of America. This isn't the Soviet Union.
No, it isn't. I saw what they did. I remember at the time, I mean, the phone calls and everything else were pretty public. And honestly, it was, as you say, political horse trading. It was not criminal, did not appear. The question has to be, what did Obama have against you? I mean, you're the governor of his home state, and clearly he sicked his Justice Department on you. What did you do to him?
Well, I was the first governor to endorse him. You know, it's kind of wish I could take that back.
I bet you do.
In fact, I remember the night, it was a Monday night, January the 8th, 2008, and you and Obama both won the Iowa caucuses. Yeah. And I remember being impressed with your speech more than his, because you pointed out that it was Elvis's birthday. And I fell in love with you at that moment when you did that, Mike.
Yes, thank you.
No, I think what Obama did was he protected himself politically. He started the whole thing. They came after me. They arrested me at 6 o'clock in the morning when my little girls were at home before school. My little one was 5 at the time. She was in bed with my wife, Patty, and I. FBI agents, SWAT team surrounding our house. I'm a sitting governor for things that eventually the appellate court reversed. Yeah. The so-called sale of the Senate seat was never a crime. It was what you just said, routine political log rolling. Obama made a deal that he would allow those people to do what they did to me as long as they stayed away from him. And in that sense, it's clear I made the wrong decision endorsing him.
You know, I mean, we all know, those of us who have run for office and have served in office, it's a nasty game. We all get that.
Right.
But when it moves beyond the political attacks and the nasty TV ads, and it becomes criminal prosecution for what I would consider a normal, may not be the prettiest thing from the public's perspective, but the old idea of, if you want a Senate seat, what are you going to do to help me? I mean, that's kind of what things work out to be. Not a criminal activity. Were you shocked when they came after you? And I mean, my gosh, not just the 6 o'clock in the morning, which is amazing to me. I mean, you're the sitting governor. They know where you are. Yes. They don't have to bring a SWAT team. They could have called your lawyer and said, we want to talk to the governor. That's not what they did.
No, they didn't. I was shocked. I was handcuffed. They had me in the back of their FBI vehicle, handcuffed. when I finally was able to get an answer, why are you doing this? And they said, you were trying to sell Barack Obama's Senate seat. And I thought it was so preposterous. And I thought, briefly and naively, that the media would see that for the absurdity of what it was. The fact is, if you were a criminal, you're a pretty stupid criminal, because how do you possibly think you're going to get away with selling the president of the United States Senate seat?
Yeah.
I was shocked by, of course, the arrest and the charges, and I was shocked by the media's unprofessionalism. I thought that they would be honest enough to recognize how absurd that was, but instead they couldn't resist the narrative, because this at the time was big news. It was international news. We had television news trucks around our home in a modest, nice neighborhood in Chicago. There were Japanese television trucks. Israeli news was in front of our house. And it was all for political conversations. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
It was just talk. And they failed to convict me at a first trial. And then they tried me a second time. And they did to me what they did to Trump in New York. They moved the line on the law. In other words, they custom-tailored the jury instructions to fit legal conversations, but turned them into fake crimes. That's how they get convictions now when they're determined to get you. This, again, is frightening, because this isn't just about what happened to me or what they're doing to President Trump. If they can do it to us, beware, they can do it to all of you. And this is not the land of the free and the home of the brave when they do this.
That's what people need to understand. If they can do it to you, if they can do it to President Trump, it's not that they could do it to folks like sitting in our audience. They will do it to them as soon as they do something that the government just doesn't like. The federal government came after you. They lost the first trial, and they didn't walk away and say, okay, well, that didn't work out. They just kept coming. And I think a lot of people need to understand that when the federal government wants to get you, they have unlimited resources, because they have all of our money. And they can spend as much of it as they want to get their political targets. So they come after you again, and there's a limit on what we can do if we're the target to defend ourselves, to hire the attorneys. It must have been an extraordinarily expensive process for you simply to defend yourself.
Well, it was a long, hard journey, just those two trials alone. After they failed to convict at the first trial, they dangled a light sentence if I would agree to plead guilty to some of those things that weren't crimes. 18 months would have made it easy for myself and my family. But I couldn't possibly do it for several reasons, not the least of which is I had a responsibility as a governor, like you did, to follow the rule of the law and to protect the Constitution. And the people voted for you or didn't vote for you. But you can't give in to what you know is a corrupt prosecution, and they know it's corrupt. They were leveraging and playing a game of chicken with me. And so I resisted. I never imagined that the judge and the court would be so rigged. I never imagined that they could actually fix trials by using jury instructions to criminalize things that were legal. And then I never imagined that, you know, he would send me to prison for a 14-year sentence. Think about this, Mike.
14 years.
No one even accused me of taking a single penny. It was all talk on a political deal that Obama initiated and Obama started. And, you know, I was out jogging one day and I was running through the streets of Chicago, and it was back when newspapers were in boxes. You can buy one. I saw a big cover photo of me on there, and the headline was 30 to life. Feds asking 30 to life for me. Needless to say, my pace picked up for the rest of that run when I saw that. But no, they're ruthless, they're relentless, they're remorseless, and they're corrupt. And they're doing it to Trump. And again, as I said before, this is a threat to our democracy. This is KGB, Soviet-style police state politics. And this election is so important, ladies and gentlemen. You have to fight to elect Trump to save our republic.
You know, it's fascinating for me to hear you, yet another Democrat, saying, you got to vote for Trump, not because his personality is all warm and fuzzy, but because he understands the rule of law and he's been subjected to it. We were talking before that Bob McDonnell, a Republican governor from Virginia, went through the same thing. His prosecutor was Jack Smith, the same guy going after Trump. And it was also a nonsensical charge. And every governor in America looked at that case, looked at yours, and said, if that's a crime, we're all toast. Because it was the normal thing of just day-to-day political maneuvering. And it was not illegal, it was not criminal. But I want to get to the point that I think is important. You did get a commutation. Did not come from Barack Obama.
No, it did not. And I was probably one of the more fortunate of the 151,000 inmates in the federal system, because my paperwork, that's the vernacular for my fellow inmates, they call it your paperwork, was on the desk of two presidents, Obama and President Trump. And my young daughters wrote letters to President Obama, who I knew since 1995. And they're the same age as his beautiful 2 young daughters. And those letters were delivered to Obama by David Axelrod. I had relationships with people who could reach the president. And he didn't, after 6.5 years there, he passed me by. He didn't do anything. 1 month later, though, I get called into the case manager's office, and they asked me to sign a waiver because the White House wants your records. Trump had been president for a month, and he was interested in seeing what he can do to try to get me out of where I was. Very interesting.
A month into office.
1 month.
Yeah.
And if I could, I said to you, Mike, I did the show Celebrity Apprentice. It was one of the best things I ever did. I never watched it. When I was governor, I was busy being governor, right?
Yeah.
And, well, he fired me, and he was right to do that. And then who'd have thought all those years later he would free me? Donald Trump's the only president in American history to have fired and freed the same guy. Even Lincoln didn't do that.
That's pretty good. You know, it is a great story, but it's a reminder that for all the talk about how Donald Trump is so partisan and that he's mean, I know other people that no one wanted to touch, and he was willing to risk a lot of criticism in giving commutations and or even pardons to people who really deserve them. And I think it speaks well of him, you know, and I'm looking at his case and I'm hoping that he can pardon himself come January. I think it would just be a delicious moment if he just did that.
Yes, exactly.
But how frustrated are you to see, and I know we've got to go, but this is the last question that's so important. How frustrating is it for you to see a party you'd given most of your adult life to that is turned into a vicious go after someone because they are your political opponent?
Well, I don't recognize today's Democratic Party. I call myself a Trumpocrat, a Democrat for Trump. It's like being a Cubs fan. You can't give it up. You're still part of that team. But this party has been hijacked by the socialists. Their tactics are Marxist. The use of the criminal justice system and other things that they do are right out of a Marxist playbook, KGB, Soviet-style politics. And so the election of Donald Trump is so much bigger than a typical presidential election because our very system's on trial right now. And in my opinion now, after all the years I've been in politics and the 2,897 days I spent with my homies in prison, and I was in a higher security prison. They had me in a higher prison where my home was a 6-foot by 8-foot prison cell. I went from a 50,000 square foot governor's mansion to a 6-foot by 8-foot prison cell with gangster disciples and Crips and Bloods, Sinaloa cartel drug dealers who look up to El Chapo like my daughters look up to Taylor Swift. There were murderers in there. 950 guys, 2% white collar, one governor, me. And I learned a lot about life. And I'll say this to anybody out there who's facing hard times and adversity and the sadness of life. So many of us look to God. It was faith, hope, and love that got me through. The Bible my wife gave me, that I took with me, gave me the strength I needed.
Well, I want to say, I think your wife is a magnificent person, and I want you to give her my regards and your 2 daughters that she was able to continue to raise with you being gone for 8 horrible years. Rod, it's great to see you. Thank you for coming and being so candid and just forthright with your story. And I hope it doesn't happen to anyone else in this country. We've got to make sure this kind of stuff stops. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You can keep up with Governor Blagojevich through social media. You can visit his guest page at Huckabee.tv.